So I didn't really know how to approach this. I was asked to kind of talk about PRACE Resources and the environment and things like that. I've done my best to try and cover some things that I think you might actually be interested in. So about how to acquire, how to access them, and how do you interact with them a little bit. They've already been discussed probably a number of times about what systems are available. At the tier 0 level, there's 6 systems, 3 of them are German, and the others are from France, Italy, and Spain. You have different architectures inside. You've got the Blue Gene, and the Cray, the Intel machines, like especially in terms of the performance. A lot of the performance comes from the MIC architectures and NVIDIA from the GPUs. The performance of the 6 systems ranges from, theoretical, okay. The performance ranges of the systems ranges from 1 to about 6 petaflops. The total aggregate performance is greater than 15. But then you also have the tier 1 level. These are called DECI calls. There's 23 different systems of those across Europe. The performance of them ranges from as low as 2.5 teraflops up to 1.2 petaflops. So there are some very big systems in these DECI calls as well. And that's because these high-end machines have arrived in the recent past, right? That's why, more or less. So the first question to ask is, when should you ask for PRACE Resources? You have to remember, and we've already discussed it with some people already, PRACE serves the whole of Europe, okay? And Europe is, 500 million people or something like that. And therefore it has a lot of bureaucracy. It takes a lot of time and effort for you and also for them to review the applications and to get back to people. Right? So there is a big overhead involved. And the questions you need to ask yourself are, do I actually have a problem that requires such large-scale resources? So, and that's it should be kind of an honest question to yourself. Do I really have a problem size that I need to run in such large systems? Because if I don't, they won't give me because if you don't have that problem, then you won't be able to prove to them that you do, and they won't give you the resources anyway. So if you don't, then you should try your local, your national, or your regional center, right? So try to get something within the university. If you outgrow that, try and go national if you can. If you outgrow that, then try and go regional, and okay. And if you manage to outgrow all those levels, then maybe PRACE is the place you should be looking at next.
Alan, I have a comment I think it is important. It's related to this, not directly this. I think it is very important to have in every country, particularly in Israel, a local frontal advisory, consultancy, frontal consultancy. I think it helps a lot user which is not very acquainted with the material. Like me, for example. I need somebody to ask him face to face, and it will help to solve problems. Otherwise, if I have to do it with email, maybe I don't know how to explain it, or things like that, and then it takes long time, So if there is a local advisory, it will help the whole system.
The next level they talk about, so the thing about that is you kind of need you need a national center. You need to have some reason for this person to exist, right?
The point is that it has to be within the framework of the PRACE and, of course, the countries that are members in the PRACE.
So
it should be one
that's easy to say and hard to do. It's easy to say and hard to do, right? Because you're kind of saying, money, right? Who pays for it? Yeah, it's true, right? But who pays for it? And how do you get them to talk to each other? Even now within PRACE, the support infrastructure, like we're a big center, right? So we have a real support infrastructure. We have teams of people who do different things, right? So if you were in ULIC, there are different people you could ask different things. I don't know everything about everything, right?
Yeah.
I know a little about almost nothing, right? So.
But collaboration about fighting for money and budget for this thing, I think would be more productive.
You have a representative within PRACE. You have the IUCC, but they don't. At least my understanding is, you can correct me, right? They don't have a.
On this point,
yeah. They don't have a compute center for their users, right? They're the interface to PRACE, but then they don't have their own user community. And how can they be strong then? Because they don't necessarily understand the problems that people have.
This will create the user community if there is a frontal consultancy.
Yeah. I mean, you need this shared machine, a shared resource or something. There has to be a reason for them to exist. I mean, you can't. IUCC could have an expert, but if the expert, where are they located or why are they located? Unless they interface with somebody like, if you decide in the end to accept that they're not going to have a machine, and then they just interface with the user support in Cyprus or something like that, so that the local presence of the user support that originates there. As a country, that doesn't seem like a great thing to do, right? I mean, because you're bigger than that, right? I mean, Israel is not such a small country. Why would it be deferring to Cyprus to organize its own user support? You shouldn't do that, right? It should be big enough to somehow have your own thing. I mean, you can work together as a region, right? To go a level above that, right? But anyway, the next thing you actually have to ask yourself is: do I have an application that works, and does it scale? Right? So does your application actually work? And if it does work, and you want to run these big systems, does it actually scale? We've talked a little bit about what scaling means, but scaling basically means that you can use the processors efficiently, that you're not going to waste a lot of time. And if you don't have one, if you don't have something that doesn't work and it doesn't scale, then you have to develop it, right? And Prace is not the place to do that. Prace is not the place you develop code, it's the place you run code. It's a production environment, okay? You can do some development to scale to large processes, but it's not the place you're going to do your basic development. The next thing is, can I actually demonstrate that I can use the resources efficiently? Okay? So this comes back to scaling again. Can I prove that I scale? Okay? Because they're going to look at these things, especially me. I do technical reviews, so these are the things I can actually look at. If you use a lot of processors, do you use them effectively? When you go from 1,000 cores to 2,000 cores, how efficient is that scaling? Do you get a factor of 2 improvement? Do you get a factor of 1.5? 1.5 maybe I could live with. If you only get a factor of 1.2, then I can't live with that, and you get refused because it doesn't scale. Okay? So the idea is that resources are expensive. These countries pay a lot of money and a lot of electrical power to run them, and they're expensive to have and to run, so wasting them is not considered an option. When you come to do these applications, we expect you to show that you can actually use them effectively. And the next question you have to ask yourself is, have I actually exhausted all my local, national or regional options? Right? Prace is the place you go when you have. If you haven't done that, then that's probably the first thing you should do. Not least because it's less effort, right? Typically it's less effort to get local resources or national or regional. Right? Prace is a lot of effort on your part, and your chances of success are not, I mean, of course you have a chance of success, but they may not be the highest, right? There's a lot of competition out there. Prace is tough, European level competition. And small requests for resources will not be granted. The way they allocate resources within Prace is that they take a look at a project, they see if it's scientifically viable. They ask for, these big projects ask for millions and millions of core hours. And basically they tend not to cut people. So they don't say, we'll give you 80% of what you're asked for or 50% of what you asked for. They give you the allocation based on the science. They say, you proved that you could use these hours to achieve a particular scientific objective. So we will give you that time. So they allocate big chunks. And it's not like everybody gets a little piece. It's basically, we have this project who was ranked first, this one who was ranked second, this one who was ranked third. Oh wait, all the computer time is gone, everybody else is out. So basically they rank the proposals, they go through the list, allocating the resources generally without cuts, and then they come to a point where all the resources are gone, and they say that's it, everybody else is a no. That's how it works. In DECI maybe it's a little bit different, but that's at the top level.
I know from the DOE projects that they do this, and then in mid-year they look at how much time was actually used, and then they reallocate for people who are great users. You also have this kind of, if you use your stuff correctly, you get more hours, or?
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe things are, that's not, I don't think that's there at the moment. I'm sure they discuss it all the time, obviously, but I don't think that's there at the moment. They basically look at the application, and people are contacted if they don't use their time, right? So basically we look, you have like, typically at least in ULIC you have a month, right, to get up and running, more or less. Because if you're coming on our system at the top level, you should have already done scaling tests and everything, right? You should basically be ready to roll in and start using them. So within a month, if you haven't started using things, they'll contact you and say, hey, what's going on? But basically the way, I'll come to it in a minute, the way our accounting works is well, at the first month, you got 2 months to use your first month's quota. We cut it up into pieces, right? So you got 2 months to use the first month. If you don't use it by the end of the second month, then you lose it. It's gone, right? And so basically the way the system is queued up, somebody else will already have used it. It's not like the system is sitting there idle. So, but somebody else gets it as a bonus.
It takes more hours than you actually have.
No, your allocated hours, it's how the system is filled, basically. So somebody else might step in and use the gap that you kind of have left, right? But they get it as a bonus. You lose it as real quota.
So you calculate bonuses on a monthly basis, actually.
Yeah.
So that's more fair.
Yeah. So basically, if you don't, if you don't use it, you lose it, and somebody else gets it. So basically, even if you use up all your hours, you can still run jobs because something like that could happen. Somebody has a penalty, and you get in instead. Okay, and then of course I wanted to mention, because that's what I spent a lot of my time on, is this link scheme project. You guys, everybody here, you have access to link scheme resources. You can exhaust them, right? We have time on machines. Apply for them. It'll be much more straightforward than using Prace. You'll get an answer faster, and you'll be able to use the system. Yes, it's not the fastest system in the world, but it's easy to get on there. It's a place where you can do the kind of scalability tests that you might need to get onto the next level of resources, okay? And hopefully it'll be there in years to come.
The platform to enter.
Exactly, to enter, right?
You mentioned it.
Yeah, you need to outgrow, right? If you can't outgrow this, then you don't have a problem. You don't need to go to Prace. If you outgrow it, you'll know very, very soon that you've outgrown it, and then you can move on to the next level. But there are certain problems that you can solve in this space, okay? There are scientific problems you can solve, and then there are performance problems that you can solve that will allow you to get to the next level. Okay, so just a quick piece about how to ask for PRACE resources. I want to keep track of time because I have a taxi. How to ask for PRACE resources. The first step would be maybe the DECI calls. That's the link up there. All the links are in the slides. They have 2 calls per year. Each participating country gives 5% of their national resources. I don't exactly know how it works in the case of Israel because you don't actually have a national resource. So I don't know if you're considered a contributing country in this case. I don't know, actually. I don't exactly know how it works. But for non-contributing countries, so even if your country is not in PRACE, but you are in PRACE, so I don't know how exactly it works in your case. But 15% of the overall allocation is given to non-participating countries. So if you were in, well, I don't know who's not in PRACE, but let's say Croatia is not in PRACE, right? As a Croatian scientist within Europe, you could still apply for resources, but you'd be limited to this 15%. And so basically there's a lot of people from countries who are not in PRACE applying for this time. So it's very, very tough. Yeah? And then there's the PRACE preparatory access, another link. They have 3 different types. Scaling one, which is like short-term access, so you can do some scaling tests that you would use in your big application. You might have some development, because you will have some development in the sense that you're porting it to a new architecture. For example, if you've only used clusters in the past and now you want to go onto the Blue Gene Q or the Cray machines, they're different architectures a little bit, so you have to do some development to port them to those architectures. The type C is one where you have support. So typically you might have the scenario of B, but you want somebody's help, or maybe you want help scaling an algorithm up to use thousands and hundreds of thousands of cores, right? So then you would apply for type C. This is a scarce resource, type C, okay? So it's again, it's competitive, not easy to get, and because you actually get real time with a person. So you see yesterday, he used to do type C support. Basically, you're getting a couple of months of his time to help you out with your application. So there's a limited amount of people involved, so it's competitive. You need a very good reason why you would want that, and typically you would probably want to be working on a code that somebody else uses. That's not just used by you personally, but by a community, right? Because they want to spend their time on something that a lot of people can use in the end. So if it's your own code, you may not be successful. If you're using something like GrowMax and you want to extend it in a particular way, then there's a higher chance of success. The preparatory access calls are continuously open, but there's quarterly cut off. So basically 4 times a year they actually evaluate them. For the regular access, there's 2 calls a year. These ones take a long time to review. They have scientific and technical reviews, and they're big allocations to a small number of projects. So they work the way I was telling you. People ask for time. If your science is good enough, you get the allocation, typically without a cut, and then we just go down. They go down the list until all the resources are gone, and that's it. Everybody else is a no. Right? So they're just big projects. Now, if you manage to get the resources, the next step is what do you do? Okay, the PRACE website has lots of information for you. There's user documentation. It's being improved all the time. It's still not fantastic, but it's getting there. It has information about how to access resources, how to move data to and from the system. It has something called the PRACE Common Production Environment. Not so special. It just means that in some way the systems will look a little bit similar for certain things that you might use a lot. It has some user support. So we'll talk a little bit about what structures are in place. So then I wanted to also mention the quotas, queues, and accounting, and I'll give you an example of how it works in Ulick, and then the training material that they have as well. So to access the resources, typically, almost everybody uses key-based SSH access, exactly like we used this week, right? So you generate an SSH key, it's there, you use it somehow to access the machines. They also support other different types of system, and not all of them maybe support this SSH key access. They use something called X509 certificates. Some of you might know what that means, some of you won't. There's basically an SSH key with some kind of special things attached that they certify that you're the real person who owns that key on a server somewhere. But that's basically all it is. I should mention that, let me see what I meant here. This is something about, there's a special PRACE network in between the big sites. So it's a dedicated network that's much faster than the public internet to move data around between the sites, and it explains a little bit about how you access that there. You can also to get onto that network, you can also access what's called door nodes. So basically you start by accessing this particular node, and then you can jump from there to different sites using the special network that is much faster for moving data around. Unicore is one of the ways you can access without doing interactive access. This is one of these kind of grid type systems where you submit jobs through a special GUI type interface. You don't need to know the details of the exact target batch system that you're using. It does require the X509 certificates again. There's a bit of a learning curve involved. If you already use it or use something similar, it's probably not too much to you. It does take a little bit of effort, but they have lots of documentation about how to do it around the place, and they have schools and things like that as well. So if you want to use those things, it's there. The next thing is about moving data to and from the systems. Another link up there. Basically, the tools in that link are great if you want to do large transfers of data, but they require these X509s again. And you must remember that if you want the maximum bandwidth, you need to be on the PRACE network. Not every country is on the PRACE network, but maybe if you're moving data around between different sites within the PRACE network, that's the way to do it. Okay, I don't know what the situation is with Israel on the PRACE network. You may or may not be. You have pretty good connection in general, but you probably don't have a dedicated one to the PRACE network, so you're probably going over your own. You could call it public internet. Over the public internet, these tools can be used and they're efficient, so it would be a good idea to use them. Many sites themselves, they have their own optimized or documented methods. Maybe it's something like high performance SSH they have installed. You won't need to know too much about that. There are other tools like BBCP that also kind of look a little bit like SCP, but they're there too. You basically have to look on the website of the site to see exactly what it is. The point I would make is that the best thing to do is to ask for advice from the execution site before you start doing the big data transfers. Okay? It can save you an awful lot of time. For example, some of the guys have mentioned it here, that getting data to and from Cyprus is kind of slow. And the reason for that is that Cyprus itself doesn't have the greatest of internet connectivity. At the moment you can live with it, but there are probably some optimizations you can do based on some of these other tools that are out there that could get your data rates twice as fast or maybe even more. The other thing you can do is that when you talk about really, really big files, sometimes the fastest thing to do is that you send a disk over, they put the files on the disk and they post it back. Because once you get to very, very large file sizes, it just makes sense. If you work out the bandwidth and how much time it's going to send it, how much time it's going to take to send it over, it can actually be faster just to put a disk in the post. Simple. It's true. I mean, they've been doing it for a long time, but it can be true. At some point, it can be true that it's worth your while to do that. And more. They even do it. We had it in between Jülich and Barcelona one time. We had it. Somebody actually came to Barcelona to pick up the discs. So we transferred it over the Prace network. They put it on a big array of discs, and the guy came from his university in his car and picked up the array of discs and drove it home. It was just quicker, right? So this Prace Common Production Environment, it doesn't really mean so much. It's just basically a guarantee that you will have certain things available to you. So it'll have some shells. It'll have a bash shell. That's the one you've been using all week, or some TC shells as well. It'll have a set of compilers. It'll have C, C++, Fortran, Java. Doesn't mean so much. They're available on almost anything anyway. It will make sure that there's particular libraries that will be available to you. The mathematical libraries that we were talking about earlier in the week, some HDF5 and some others as well. There'll be some tools on there that are very, very useful for you, like Make, Perl, Python, Tcl, TK, all these things. And it's not such a big commitment of theirs. These.
Possible to install some additional software or ask for installation?
So I kind of come to that. The next point is that typically there's much more software available on the systems already, right? And if you want to install something extra, the people you contact are the local support, right? Don't go to Prace telling them that you want to install something on some system. They can't do it anyway, right? It's a local question, right? So you ask the local support to do something like that.
It's happened to me in Leipzig.
Yeah?
It's happened there in the past.
Yeah.
So I put it on my private directory and work on it. When we see everything is fine, they put it on the public.
Yeah, exactly. So just talk to the local support when you want something like that. It depends on what it is, right? Sometimes they will tell you just do it yourself. Sometimes they will say, okay, that's useful for more people. We'll install it as a module, no problem, right? So, like, we use a special software or a kind of a tool within Link Scheme called EasyBuild. So installing software is typically very easy for us, and there's a lot of support out there. So if you want something, you should talk to them first rather than do it yourself. We can maybe do a better job in the first place. But they don't support everything, and like they're not going to install your particular code as a module because it's only you who uses it, right?
I'm not speaking about individual code, some
library.
Yeah. This stuff is easy. You just ask them. Just ask them and then install it. Yeah, you can always just use module avail, see what's available out there. This Prace Common Production Environment, it also has some variables that might be useful for you, like the archive variable. It might have some compilation flags that are particular to each site. So like these might be useful if you're compiling C code or Fortran code. You might have some linking flags that you could use instead. So what these actually mean on each site would vary from site to site, right? The idea is they're specific to each site. This Prace Scratch would be your workspace. So when you're doing your jobs, you run it within Prace Scratch. That's the idea, at least. On the user support side, they have a help desk. It's ticket-based system. They have some documentation where possible. They have best practice guides, especially for the big machines. Some best practice guides out there about how to use them efficiently. They have a FAQ website as well, so you can look at some frequent questions that they have. Typically, that stuff will be about file transfers and things. I mean, if you really want... so this is the next point, basically. Prace users on any machine are typically treated as standard users, right? Standard system users. So the real user support relating to a specific machine is provided by the execution site. And the easiest way to access it is through standard channels. You can go to Prace first, and the only thing they will do is just send your email to somebody else, right? So it's just indirect. It's just going to take extra time. It's overhead, right? So what I would suggest is just check the website of the place themselves. When you get access to somewhere, read their website a little bit, and if you have a problem, it'll tell you there how to find a solution or how to contact somebody to help you find a solution. The thing is, if you're unhappy with something at a particular Prace website, the first thing I would suggest is that you contact the Prace user forum. So they have a forum there available where you can kind of discussed as a community. They have representatives that can go back and talk to particular sites or can request certain things. So if you have a problem, if you don't like the way they do the queuing system in Italy, you can go onto the user forum and talk about it. There could be a discussion. In the end, they might decide that it really doesn't work very well in Italy, and we should go and, as Prace, and discuss with them that they should change the system a little bit, that it's not efficient or something like that. Right? So that would be the place, that would be the way to work through the channels to do that. As regards quotas and queues and accounting systems, all the users are typically treated alike. Okay? At least that's the way it happens in Ulick. In some places maybe that's not true. I think in Italy you kind of you're lower down the food chain a bit when you're a Prace user. But it depends, right? It depends from site to site. Typically they should be treated like everybody else. Prace allocates a quota. Execution sites administer the quota. So what actually happens with your quota depends on the execution site. So Prace doesn't control this. All they do is say you can have access to this machine and so much quota within this year's period. What actually happens on the actual site depends on what they do. You should check the execution website or ask their user support to discover exactly what the individual mechanisms are. The idea of quota policies or what the differences might be, I'll give you an example of JSC. At JSC, in Ulick, we divide it up into pieces. Right? So you have 12 months, we divide it up into 12 one-month pieces. You kind of get a 3-month window to access that quota. So you get quota 1 month, you have up to 3 months to access it. Basically the way we do it is that in any particular month you have access to the previous month and the month in front. Right? So basically that gives you kind of a 3-month window to use something. Right? That's how we do it. If you don't use it within the window, you lose it. That's it, it's gone. Okay? This allows us to encourage people to continuously use the system over a year, and it also avoids monopolization. So where somebody with huge amounts of quota can go on and occupy the system for large periods of time. Right? So that's something else we want to avoid. That's the quota policies. In terms of the queues, I can give you an example from Ulick, but they do definitely vary from place to place. We just have a single batch queue. Everybody has the same priority. And there's a 24-hour hard limit on jobs. When I say we have a single batch queue, that's for people with quota. We actually have an out-of-quota system as well. Their priority is much lower, and they have reduced access to the resources as well. So it means that when you've used up all your quota within a particular period, you can still submit jobs, but they're lower priority, and you can't access the same amount of resources. There is a tool within Prace, which I've never used, called DART, Distributed Accounting Report Tool. It kind of forces each site to report the quota usage in a particular manner, uniform manner, back to this tool. So you can use that to view how your quota is being used up. Typically sites have their own systems. Just ask them. It depends on how you want to do it. If you have multiple sites that you're working on, maybe this tool is useful for you. Again, it requires the X509 certificate.
Do you have any limitation of number of quotes using their job or their user?
In Ulick, the whole I gotta go. In Ulick, the whole thing is encouraged to people to grow their problems, right? So actually, if I was really honest, I'd say the bigger the task you want to do, the more important you are, right? So the priority, if you're going to run on the whole machine, you're high priority for us, right? The smaller you get, the less important you are, right? That's basically the way we do it. I really got to run. I got a taxi in 3 minutes. On the training side, they have a training website. You've already been connected to it. They have best practice guides. They do slides and videos. There always is, of course, site-specific training in different places. And there's loads of material on HPC training online. I'm working on a particular project to try and collect it in a more cohesive manner. But they have portals in Exceed, which is the Prace equivalent in the US. They have something called a HPC University, which is very, very useful, and I'm connected to them a little bit. Even in Link Scheme, there's a place that coordinates information a little bit. That's like the first, you could say the alpha stage of the next thing that we're working on. I got to run, but that's it. Thanks for listening.